sa lahat ng iba pang philosophy, ito yung pinaka-sound. And so, ngayong tanghali, itatry kong i-defend yung 5 groups ni Dr. Edward Feser. So, enjoy kayong lahat dyan and good afternoon.
Alright. So, next is Sir Arfel. Sir Arfel, welcome and introduce yourself.
Okay, good morning at good afternoon. Ako pala si Arfel Tayuno. Isa akong graduate student. Nag-aaral ako ng mycology sa UST, University of Santo Tomas. Isa ako sa mga admin ng PA o Pinoy Atheist at saka mainstay ako ng Patas. Isa ako agnostic.
Alright. Okay. So again, today's topic, kung makikita nyo sa title, it's Does God Exist? And basically, sa Patas group, sa Patas forum, they already have talked about what are the common grounds or anong specific grounds na kanilang i-argue, like what who God is, or what God is, tsaka ito ba yung biblical God and whatnot. But they have come into conclusion that this will be Dr. Edward Feser's God, or yung ina-argue na God niya from his 5 proofs of for God's existence. And if you're not familiar with it, you can always reach out to Arvin, or there's a lot of references naman dyan sa Google. And basically, Sir Arfel also said na he's not going to debunk the biblical God in this specific debate, but he's he's going to specifically counter argue or to debunk the argument itself, or the premises. So here, I'm going to give 15 minutes opening speech for Sir Arvin. And wait a second. Ayan. It's a maximum time, but we're going to be gracious naman. We're not going to cut them off exactly 15 minutes, but we're going to remind them naman. Siguro around 30 seconds we're going to give them out to finish or to conclude.
Okay, God exists. That's the conclusion. So let's see if that can be shown by the following 5 arguments or proofs. So expressed in the way as expressed by Dr. Edward Feser in his book 5 Proofs for the Existence of God. So let's start. Aristotelian proof. First premise: change is a real feature of the world. Second, but change is the actualization of a potential. Number 3, so the actualization of potential is a real feature of the world. Number 4, no potential can be actualized unless something already actualizes it. It's the principle of causality. Number 5, so any change is caused by something already actual. Number 6, the occurrence of any change C presupposes something or substance S which changes. Number 7, the existence of S at any given moment itself presupposes the concurrent actualization of S potential for existence. Number 8, so any substance S has at any moment some actualizer A of existence. Number 9, A's own existence at the moment it actualizes S itself presupposes either A, the concurrent actualization of its own potential for existence, or B, A's being purely actual. If A's existence, number 10, if A's existence at the moment it actualizes S presupposes the concurrent actualization of its own potential for existence, then there exists a regress of concurrent actualization that is either infinite or terminates a purely actual actualizer. 11, but such a regress of concurrent actualizers would constitute a hierarchical causal series, and such series cannot regress infinitely. Number 12, so either A itself is a purely actual actualizer, or there is a purely actual actualizer which terminates the regress that begins with the actualization of A. Number 13, so the occurrence of C and thus the existence of S at any given moment presupposes the existence of a purely actual actualizer. Number 14, so there is a purely actual actualizer.
S
Number
requires
15, in order for there to be more than one purely actual actualizer,
requires
there would have to be some differentiating feature that one such actualizer has that the other lack. Number 16, so there could be such a differential feature only if a purely actual actualizer had some unactualized potential, which being purely actual, it does not
purely
have.
actual actualizer has no
Number
potential.
17, so there can be no such differentiating feature,
Actualizer.
and there's no way for there to be more than one purely actual actualizer. Number 18,
So
so there
potential.
for this purely actual actualizer to be capable of change, it would have to have potentials capable of actualization. Number 20, but being purely actual, it lacks any such potentials. Number 21, so it is immutable or incapable of change. Number 22, if this purely actual actualizer existed in time, then it would be capable of change, which it is not. Number 23, so this purely actual actualizer is eternal, existing outside of time. Number 24, if purely actual actualizer were material, then it would be changeable and exist in time, which it does not. Number 25, so the purely actual actualizer is immaterial. Number 26, if the purely actual actualizer were corporeal, then it would be material, which it is not. Number 27, so the purely actual actualizer is incorporeal. Number 28, if the purely actual actualizer were imperfect, in any way it would have some unactualized potential, which being purely actual, it does not have. Number 29, so the purely actual actualizer is perfect. Number 30, for something to be less than fully good is for it have to have a privation. That is, to fail to actualize some feature proper to it. Number 31, a purely actual actualizer being purely actual can have no such privation. Number 32, so the purely actual actualizer is fully good. Number 33, to have power entails being able to actualize potentials. Number 34, any potential that is actualized is either actualized by the purely actual actualizer or by a series of actualizers which terminates in the purely actual actualizer. Number 35, so all power derives from the purely actual actualizer. Number 36, but to be that from which all power derives is to be omnipotent. Number 37, so the purely actual actualizer is omnipotent. Number 38, whatever is in an effect is in the cause in some way, whether formally, virtually, or eminently. The principle of this comes from the principle of proportionate causality. Number 39, the purely actual actualizer is the cause of all things. Number 40, so the forms or patterns manifest in all things it causes must in some way be in the purely actual actualizer. Number 41, these forms or patterns can exist either in the concrete way in which they exist in the individual particular things or in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. Number 42, they cannot exist in the purely actualizer in the same way they exist in individual particular things. Number 43, so they must exist in the purely actualizer in the abstract way in which they exist in the thoughts of an intellect. Number 44, so the purely actual actualizer has intellect or intelligence. Number 45, since it is the forms or patterns of all things that are in the thoughts of this intellect, there's nothing that is outside of the range of those thoughts. Number 46, for there to be nothing outside the range of something's thought is for that thing to be omniscient. Number 47, so the purely actual actualizer is omniscient. Number 48, so there exists a purely actual cause of the existence of things which is one, immutable, eternal, immaterial, incorporeal, perfect, fully good, omnipotent, intelligent, and omniscient. Number 49, but for there to be such a cause of things is just what it is for God to exist. Conclusion, God exists. So that's the Aristotelian proof. The second proof is the Neoplatonic proof. First premise, the things of our experience are composite. Number two, a composite exists at any moment only insofar as its parts are combined at that moment. Number three, this composition of parts requires a concurrent cause. Number four, so any composite has a cause of existence at any moment at which it exists. Number five, so each of the things of our experience has a cause at any moment at which it exists. Number six, if the cause of a composite thing's existence at any moment is itself composite, then it will in turn require a cause of its own existence at that moment. Number seven, the regress of causes this entails is hierarchical in nature, and such a regress must have a first member. Only something absolutely simple or non-composite could be the first member of such a series. Number nine, so the existence of each of the things of our experience presupposes an absolutely simple or non-composite cause. Number 10, in order for there to be more than absolutely one simple or non-composite cause, it should have to have some differentiating feature that the others lack. Number 11, but for the cause to have such a feature would be for it to have parts, in which case it would not really be simple or non-composite. Number 12, so no absolutely simple or non-composite cause can have such a differentiating feature. Number 13, so there cannot be more than one absolutely simple or non-composite cause. Number 14, if the absolutely simple or non-composite cause were changeable, then it would have parts which it gains or loses, which being simple or non-composite, it does not have. Number 15, so the absolutely simple or non-composite cause is changeless or immutable. Number 16, if the absolutely simple or non-composite cause had a beginning or an end, it would have parts which could either be combined or broken apart. Number 17, so since it has no such parts, the absolutely simple or non-composite cause is beginningless and endless. Number 18, whatever is immutable, beginningless, and endless is eternal. Number 19, so the absolutely simple or non-composite cause is eternal. Number 20, if something is caused, then it has parts which need to be combined. So the absolutely simple or non-composite cause, if it has no part, is uncause. Number 22, everything is either a mind or a mental content or a material entity or an abstract entity. Number 23, an abstract entity is causally inert. Then number 24, so the absolutely simple or non-composite cause, since it is not causally inert, is not abstract entity. Number 25, a material entity has parts and is changeable. Number 26, so the absolutely simple or non-composite cause, since it is without parts and changeless, is not a material entity. Number 27, a mental content presupposes the existence of a mind, and so cannot be ultimate cause of things. Number 28, so the absolutely simple or non-composite cause, being the ultimate cause of things, cannot be a mental content. Number 29, so the absolutely simple or non-composite cause must be a mind. Number 30, since the absolutely simple or non-composite cause is unique, everything other than it is composite. Number 31, every composite has the absolutely simple or non-composite cause as its ultimate cause. Number 32, so the absolutely simple or non-composite cause is the ultimate cause of everything other than itself. Number 33, if the absolute simple or non-composite cause had potentialities as well as qualities, it would have parts. 34, so since it has no parts, it must have no potentialities but purely actual. Number 35, as we have seen in Aristotelian proof, a purely actual cause must be perfect, omnipotent, fully good, and omniscient. So, number 36, so there exists a cause which is simple or non-composite, unique, immutable, eternal, immaterial, mind, and intellect, and cause, the ultimate cause of everything other than itself, purely actual, perfect, omnipotent, fully good, and omniscient. Number 37, but for there to be such a cause is just what it is for a God to exist. Number 38, so God exists. So third proof, Augustinian proof, there are three possible accounts of abstract objects such as universals, propositions, number, and other mathematical objects, and possible worlds. Those three are realism, nominalism, and conceptualism. Number two, there are decisive arguments in favor of realism. Number three, there are insuperable objections against nominalism. Number four, there are insuperable objections against conceptualism. Number five, so some version of realism is true. Number six, there are three possible versions of realism: Platonic realism, Aristotelian realism, and scholastic realism. Number seven, if Platonic realism is true, then abstract objects exist in a third realm distinct from either the material world or any intellect. Number eight, if Aristotelian realism is true, then abstract objects exist only in human or contingently existing intellects. Number nine, if scholastic realism is true, then abstract objects exist not only in contingently existing intellects, but also in at least one necessarily existing intellect. Number 10, there are insuperable objections against the claim that abstract objects exist in a third realm, distinct from either material world or any intellect. 11, so Platonic realism is not true. Number 12, there are insuperable objections against the claim that abstract objects exist only in human or other contingently existing intellect. Number 13, so Aristotelian realism is not true. Number 14, so scholastic realism is true. Number 15, so abstract objects exist not only in contingently existing intellect, but also in at least one necessarily existing intellect. Number 16, abstract objects such as universal propositions, numbers, and other mathematical objects and possible worlds are all logically related to one another in such a way that they form an interlocking system of ideas. Number 17, The reason for concluding that at least some objects exist in necessarily existing intellect also entails that this interlocking system of being must exist in necessarily existing intellect. Number 18, so this interlocking system of ideas exists in at least one necessarily existing intellect. Number 19, a necessarily existing intellect would be purely actual. Number 20, there cannot be more than one thing that is purely actual. Number 21, so there cannot be more than one necessarily existing intellect. Number 32, an intellect which the interlocking system of ideas in question exists would be conceptually omniscient. So, number 33, so the one necessarily existing intellect is conceptually omniscient. Number 34, if this one necessarily existing intellect were not also omniscient in the stronger sense that it knows all contingent truths, then it would have unrealized potential and does not be purely actual. Number 25, so it is also omniscient in the stronger sense. Number 26, what is purely actual must also be omnipotent, fully good, immutable, immaterial, incorporeal, and eternal. Number 27, so there is exactly one necessarily existing intellect which is purely actual, omniscient, omnipotent, fully good, immutable, immaterial, corporeal, and eternal. Number 28, but for there to be such a thing is just what it is for God to exist. So number 29, so God exists. Number 4, may ilang minutes na lang? 2 minuto. So, sige. I-stop na lang pagkada 2 minutes. So, Mr. Crook, for any of the things we know from experience, stones, trees, dogs, human beings, etc., there's a distinction to be drawn between its essence and existence. Number 2, if this were not a real distinction, a distinction between aspects of reality itself, and not merely between ways of thinking and talking about reality, then we could know whether or not a thing exists simply by knowing its essence. 3, but we cannot know whether or not a thing exists simply by knowing its essence. Number 4, if there were not real distinction, then the things we know from existence would exist in a necessary way rather than in merely contingent way. But in fact, they exist in merely contingent way and not in necessary way. Number 6, if there could in principle be more than one thing the essence of which is identical to existence, then the two or more such things would be distinguishable in the way that species of the same genus are distinguished or members of the same species are distinguished or in some other way. Number 7, but they cannot be distinguished in any of these ways. Number 8, so there could not be principle more than one thing. So there could not in principle be more than one thing that the essence of which is identical to existence. Number 9, so for any of the things we know from experience, if the distinction between its essence and existence were not a real distinction, then there could not in principle be more than one of them. Number 10, but in fact, for each of the things we know from experience, there is or could be more than one of them. 11, so for each of the things we know from experience, the distinction between its essence and existence is real distinction. Number 12, for anything the essence of which is really distinct from its existence must be imparted to it either by itself or by some cause distinct from it. Number 13, but if it is imparted to existence itself, it will be the cause of itself. For number 14, nothing can be cause of itself. Number 15, so it can't impart existence to itself. Number 16, so for anything, the essence of which is really distinct from its existence must be imparted to it by some cause distinct. Done na? Time na? Okay. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
done na. So,
Masyadong mataas.
Okay.
So si Sir Arfel, he's going to present why
Ako na ba?
he does. Yeah,
Ako na?
ikaw na.
O sige.
Alright, let's go.
Hello, ako naman sa side. So, ililinawin ko na ang dinidiscuss natin ang proposition, whether proposition God exists is either true or knowable. Ang position ko as an agnostic, it is at least not known or not knowable. That's 2 points. Therefore, to win this debate, the proposition must be proven to be necessarily true. Yun ang point. To win this debate for the pro side. So let's go. Slide 1. Pwedeng ilabas yung slide 1. Anyway, discuss ko ng content. There's 2 kinds of proposition. One proposition has necessary truth and one has contingent truth. Yung next slide.
Necessary truth.
There are 2 kinds of proposition. Necessary truths are truths that are necessary as a proposition. Universal sila in all worlds. Contingent proposition are propositions whose truths cannot be determined and may be true or may be false. Therefore, they are unknown. Okay? They can be true, pero we have no knowledge or certainty that it is true. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Ginawan ko ng summary ang lahat ng 5 proof of Feser. All 5 proof of Feser can be formalized into 2 forms of arguments. One is a cosmological argument, 2 is an ontological argument. Ang usapan is gawing syllogistic, so I tried to make it syllogistic. Cosmological argument of yung 5 proofs has a cosmological part, which is change is real. It's a first claim. PAA, meaning purely actualizer, is necessary to change. Thus, PAA is real. Okay? If PAA is real, ang ontological argument is it must be perfect. God is a perfect being, thus God is the purely actualizer. Malinaw? Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Ito yung aming pagkasunduan. God has these attributes, and we define existence as having objective reality or being. So, any attributes na hindi mapatunayan dito technically would necessitate that the proposition was not met. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay. Ito ang point. Ito ang main point ko. The proposition God exists is a synthetic a posteriori proposition. There are at least 4 theoretical kinds of proposition. Synthetic a posteriori proposition, which are propositions that requires experience to be known. Okay? There's also a theoretical synthetic a priori arguments. Example note ay mathematics and concepts obtained from causation, given that causation is real. Another thing is analytical proposition. Analytical proposition are true by definition and are universal. Ibig sabihin, they are true in all possible worlds. Itong mga analytical proposition are deductive. And there's also another kind of proposition na theoretical pa rin is analytical a posteriori proposition. Tapos, analytical a posteriori proposition are testimony. Ang problema, all a posteriori forms of proposition are not perfect. Kasi our knowledge comes from our senses, introspection, and memory, and some theoretical, unsubstantiated forms of senses. Katulad ng telekinesis, telepathy. Okay? Pero alam natin lahat, our senses is not perfect, our introspection is not perfect, and our memory is not perfect. Therefore, by definition, all knowledge from experience are not perfect. Okay? But analytical proposition are universal, so they are perfect. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, knowledge and truth is defined as truth. Correspondence theory, you can use any other theory you want, pero ito ang pinaka-universally accepted. Truth is any proposition which is true if it corresponds to reality. Okay? Pero mahirap kasing gamitin yon, yung definition na yun. So we use a pragmatic form of definition of truth. That a proposition is true if it corresponds to facts. That's truth. Okay? Another principle is consilience. No truth can contradict another truth. Okay. Definition naman ng knowledge, this is hindi to perfect. This definition is also not perfect, pero ito yung laging ginagamit. So I use this. Knowledge must be a justified true belief plus an unknown factor X na kailangan to explain get-here problems. So mahirap natin gamitin yan. So baliwalian natin yung X. Mahirap yan. So hindi natin alam yan. Baliwalaan natin yung truth in a way kasi truths are metaphysical concepts. So a proposition can either be true or false. 50-50. Pero what's important is the justification and that we are capable of belief. There are two universally accepted kinds of justification: synthetic a posteriori justification and analytic a priori justification. Ibig sabihin, justification that can be experienced and justification that are by definition true. Okay? Next slide. Dude, next slide, next slide. Okay. Ito ang clear point ko. There's a concept called veil of perception. All empirical or synthetic a priori knowledge are not perfect gateway to knowledge because sensory perception are not perfect. So practically all empirical knowledge are merely conditional or contingently true. They are not by definition necessarily true, or they are imperfect knowledge. Description of nature. The description of the nature of any real phenomenon are by definition empirical knowledge. Okay? Another form of knowledge is knowledge gained from deduction. Deductive knowledge are only true by definition. But as long as the premises are true, the truth of the deduction is absolute. Okay, but all analytical propositions do not add any new concept in the argument by definition. Okay, next. Next slide. Okay, ito ang change. Ito ang problema. Change by premise 1 is claimed to be a real phenomenon. Okay? Pero ito ang problema natin. Empirical description of change and theoretical description of change. There are two, at least, description of change. One is purely empirical. One is theoretical and descriptional. Theoretical descriptional definitions of change are, by definition, descriptions of the natural property of change, and thus, by definition, are empirical. And by definition, empirical knowledge is imperfect, therefore contingent propositions. So empirical description of change, we know that change occurs in the real world when there is an object B that undergoes some change or difference. Meron tayong prior instance, meron tayong observed properties, kulay green siya, malamig siya, cold, or maalat siya, taste. After a later instance, one of those property become different. For example, naging kulay red na siya, uminit siya or hot, or tumamis siya. Pero, for this point lang muna, we agree that the principle of causality applies. If principle of causality applies, it implies that at least object A, which is the cause of change, must therefore necessarily exist. And given the proof, at least B must be in time. Okay? Theoretical description of change, as is premised to given, change is the actualization of potential. Ang problema lang, we have already shown that this is an empirical knowledge. Therefore, by definition, this is only contingent truth, not necessary truth. Ang counter-analogy dyan, gravity is defined as a force. Gravity is defined as a force between two objects that has mass. Yan ang definition of knowledge. It's a definition of knowledge that we know is wrong. Next. Next. Okay. Change as described in the Aristotelian proof, at least as Aristotelian proofs, actualizer, may kailangan niya ng at least two conditions. There must be an actualizer which causes the change. The actualizer must be actual. So by definition, because it is actual, it must exist at the point of change. Okay? So at also, meron pang kinakailangan, substance S must also exist because substance S is the object that undergoes change and possess the potential for change. Substance S, during the time of change, meron ay existent. Because substance S, in order to be capable of change, must possess potentiality. Pure potentiality, itong point ko, pure potentiality anything that is purely potential is logically incoherent to exist. Therefore, any substance that has pure potentiality cannot exist. Okay? Pero ito another thing, truth must correspond to facts. Yun ang point. Balik muna. Kailangan ko ilagay yung point na yun. Okay. In all observed things, both the actualizer and the substance S exist in time at moment of change. Tapos ito pa ang problema. In all observed change, the existence of both A and B is conserved. First law of thermodynamics. The existence of both the cause and the changing substance is preserved. Bagong nag-exist, walang nawalang existence. Okay, next. Yeah, galing yan sa proof itself. It's the statement of the proof itself. So, slide 9, purely actual things versus actual things. Purely actual things, by definition, must exist. Okay, propositional yan. Yan ang statement. It cannot undergo change because it has no potential. Ang problema, according to the proof, ito conditional uli, purely actual things has the power to actualize. Because it cannot change, it must be outside of time. Ang problema, mayroon tayong propositions na ginamit itong words na to. The word perfect and the word proper. Ang problema, perfect and proper are subjective terms. Therefore, if they are subjective terms, they have no objective reality. Thus, cannot be considered truth or knowledge. Any proposition that use those terms cannot be knowledge. Ito pa. Any actual things that has potential. Actual things that has potential, they must exist. Pero they also possess potential, so they can undergo change. Itong note, no change can occur if both A and B does not exist at moment of change. Thus, the existence of purely actual actualizer alone cannot produce change. Okay, next slide. Things that does not exist. Ito naman ang hypothetical substance C. Substance C, by definition, does not exist, so it is not actual but potential. But if it is not actual and has potential, then it is, by definition, purely potential. A logically incoherent object, kanina, that cannot exist. Therefore, substance S cannot exist. Ako, I don't know. Kung gusto nyo mag-discuss ng metaphysics ng substances that does not exist, problema nyo yun. What I know is that there is no moment in time that substance X, things that does not exist, na na-experience natin. The assumption based on substance X, C, cannot be considered knowledge. Okay, next. Next na po. Next. Okay, conclusion. Ito ang problema. Any argument that possesses at least one synthetic a priori premise must be a synthetic a posteriori argument. Because the five proofs have at least one synthetic a posteriori premise, by definition, the proof given is a synthetic a posteriori argument, which by definition must be ultimately justified by our existence, by our experience. Experience meaning senses, introspection, memory. Any argument that possesses at least one contingent proposition, meaning proposition that is not necessarily true, must, by definition, have a conclusion that is not necessarily true, therefore contingent. Ito pa, any synthetic a posteriori proposition that cannot be justified through our experience, by definition, cannot be known, unknowable. Any argument that has at least one proposition that contradicts at least one fact cannot be true, given the first law of thermodynamics is a fact. Therefore, existence cannot be considered true. The proposition, God exists, cannot be shown to be known today. using the proof given. Tapos na po. Okay na yan.
Kami kanina. Sa sobrang overload ng PC. May dalawang PowerPoint.
Moderator, may time pa si
Tsaka naka-share
Arfel.
screen pa kami sa aming conference call. Kaya siguro nag-overload yung PC, ayaw na mag-transmit ng datas. Ngayon parang okay naman. So, i-continue na namin. Nasa second round na kami. Sir Arfel are yung agnostic rebuttal na naman. So, let me have them sa call. Let me get back to the call na lang. I'm very sorry. Pero, recorded debate naman to. I will post na lang mamaya sa YouTube. Siguro next time, itatry ko sa YouTube ako mag-live. Kasi ito yung problem lagi sa live ng Facebook. Pag nag-overload yung PC, nag-hang yung Facebook live. So, yeah. Ayun, live na tayo ulit.
Oh.
Alright, so...
Gumagana na?
Gumagana na. Nagsibalikan na sila. Okay.
Okay.
Alright, you can start na. Siguro simulan na lang simula. Ay, sa starting...
Okay. Balik ulit tayo.
Okay.
Sa argument, counter rebuttal. Okay, start.
Okay.
Okay. Start ko ulit. Ito ang problema. The Aristotelian proof given, what have we proven to be true? What we have contained? First, that change exists. Okay, we agree that change exists. Ito na-prove ko, ito contingent to. This is a contingent proposition. That change is the actualization of potentiality.
Right. You can
Pero,
start now.
alam natin contingent to. Therefore, the conclusion must be contingent or given na yun. Technically, panalo at this point pa lang. Pero, para masaya, let's accept that change is the actualization of potentiality. May problema ka pa rin dyan. Because the definition of change you have given, even if we assume it to be true, meron siyang requirements. For change to occur, there must be an actualizer, which is actual. It exists. But it also presumes the existence of substance S, the one undergoing change. Okay, yun ang requirement for change to happen. Yun ang definition na we have agreed with. The actualizer must exist and the change thing, substance S, undergoing change must also exist at the point of change. At the instance of change, yun ang requirement. Does it follow na contingent siya or ang existence niya or what? It does not follow. That is another claim not substantiated by the fact of change. What is substantiated is that the actualizer is actual and the substance must be actual. Kasi ang kailangan, merong actualizer at merong potential. And then nag-accept ka na, you have already accepted that pure potentiality cannot exist. Therefore, substance S must be actual and has potential at the point of change. Then it follows, if it is actualizer, even if it is purely actualizer, even if it's a purely actual actualizer, by itself, kung nag-iisa siya, change cannot occur. Ito rin, if actual, potential, if substance S exists, there are actual things that has potential, pero walang actualizer, we agree, change cannot occur. We agree that. Pero pag wala ang isa doon, sa necessity na yon, change cannot happen. That's the very nature of the argument that you yourself have presented. Okay? So, given yon. We do not know. We cannot know if all actualizers are contingent. We cannot know if substance S, the existence of substance S is contingent. What we agree by the realism of change is that actualizer and substance S must be actual at point of change. Okay, given na yun. Ito pang issue ko sa'yo. you use the term form. Okay? Ang problema lang, you have only presented two proofs. Aristotelian proof at saka yung Augustinian proof. As far as I can remember, there's no term form in those proof. Therefore, this term form and matter is substance, is a claim not substantiated by the proof you have given. Okay, gets? Insertion siya. Hindi ka warranted to make this claim given the proof you have provided. Okay, so you cannot claim this one. That prime matter is potential or form and matter is substance. It has nothing to do with the proof you have given. Ito pa. All potential must be actualized. You claim that all potential must be actualized. It is also a synthetic proposition. It cannot stand alone. It's a new claim from the proof you have given. You need to prove this to be true. What we do know is there is potential. It doesn't follow that all potential must be actualized. Okay. Ito pang claim mo sa Augustinian. Composite things cannot explain itself. Ito ay because of principle of sufficient reason. Composite things cannot explain itself. Okay, let's accept that. Ang problema lang, composite things are composed of simple particles. Kaya nga nagkakaroon ng parts. Therefore, the parts of the composite things must therefore not be one. Marami sila. If you accept that composite things exist, the substance of composite things must be many, even if they are simple. Okay, purely actual actualizer, to break ang explanation, purely actual actualizer cannot produce change alone. Okay? Lahat ng nakikita natin, itong term mo, lahat ng nakikita natin, ang basis mo for knowledge. Ang problema, everything that we have seen, nagpa-follow siya at merong potential. Sa law of thermodynamics. You have already accepted that the material existence of the actualized and the actualizer is preserved. Walang nagdag na existence, walang na minus na existence. Okay, issue mo pa yung synthetic a priori knowledge proposition. Ito ang ibig sabihin ng synthetic a priori position. Synthetic means, distinction niya, are proposition whose predicate is not part of the subject. Okay? Synthetic yan. Any synthetic proposition has a predicate that is not substantiated by its subject, by the definition of the subject. Ang ibig sabihin ng a posteriori, all a posteriori distinction or proposition are true because we get its knowledge or truthness from our experiences. Ang problema sa iyo, if deduction lang ang argument natin, kung ang deduction can be true, yeah, given. A proof can be purely definitional. Ang problema lang, if you don't insert, if you don't add new predicate sa system na yon, it will become only definitional truths that has nothing to do with what is real. Yun ang kaya kailangan natin ng synthetic a posteriori premise is yun ang nagdadagdag ng realism doon sa ating definition. You cannot escape that. Okay, ano pa? Ito pang point. You put principle of sufficient reason. And it claims that everything has an explanation. Okay, let's say I accept that. Ang problema lang, hindi lahat ng explanation requires a living, intelligent being. There can be explanations that isn't intellectual or intelligent. Kung sabihin mo na mag-require ka na lahat ay ganon, obviously hindi. Kasi we can observe explanations that are not alive. Ito pa ang assumption mo, not all contingent beings are, not all contingent, okay. Sabi mo, things that exist can be contingent or necessary. Ang problema lang, hindi malinaw sa proposition mo, it's another insertion. that only actualizers exist. Walang nakalagay sa proof niyan. Therefore, there are things that are not purely actual that exist. Okay? Regardless, it is possible na creation can happen. Ang problema lang, if you claim creation, which we define as the addition of existence to a changing system, hindi siya knowledge kasi we have never seen or experienced anything like this na nangyari. It is not impossible. It is not considered knowledge. If we don't know something, we cannot claim it to be true. Kung i-insert mo to sa proof mo, ang mangyayari, the proposition would become untrue or at least unknowable. Because yun ang point ng ano ba yung tawag nito? Induction, deduction. Yun ang point ng deduction. All the premises must be necessarily true to make a conclusion that is necessarily true. Ang problema lang, kung maglalagay tayo ng premise that is not necessarily true, merely contingent, the conclusion proves that it is also contingent. Okay? I can allow you any contingent premises, but it would not change the fact. It would not change the fact that your conclusion would remain contingent. Therefore, by definition, it's not necessarily true. Anong time ko pa? Okay, marami pa akong time. Okay, balik tayo dun sa nature of change. Okay? You cannot escape kasi na given sa definition mo of change, there must be two substances at the instance of change. Yun yung accepted natin to be real. That's accepted to be real. And it is contingent to the fact of the law of thermodynamics. Ito pa ang problema. One point. The law of thermodynamics is also an empirical knowledge. Therefore, it is a contingent principle. It is possible to be false. Okay, ang nag-state niya na that the law, the first law of thermodynamics is a contingent truth. It may not be true by definition. Ang problema lang, if you make any conclusion that contradicts the law of thermodynamics, by definition, it would become unknown. Therefore, if you make any premise that contradicts the law of thermodynamics, your conclusion again would become unknowable. What we do know is when things change, walang nababago sa existence. The actualizer still exists, and substances, the being changed, also exist. May nadagdag ba? Wala. Both of them still remains to be existent. That is change. Yan ang inaccept nating phenomenon to base yung base natin ng synthetic claim natin. Yun yung nag-add ng truth doon sa buong proof that makes the proof not just definitionally true, but also true in the real sense. Without it, it would only become definitionally true kahit hindi ko mapakita na meron siyang deductive fallacy. If I can point out any synthetic premise that is only contingent, then it follows that your conclusion is also contingent. Because you cannot make a necessary conclusion from a contingent premise. Ano pa? Ang problema pa, ano pa ba ang isip ko? Well, technically, yun ang main argument ko eh. Dun sa, una, you cannot claim another claim about substance na hindi part ng iyong proof. Therefore, you cannot claim that form and matter are the definitions of substance. Ito pa, hindi mo rin pwedeng sabihin na suddenly, yung substance S does not exist at point of change and change can exist. Ang alam natin, the actualizer, substance A, and substance S, that which is changing, must be present at the point of change. You cannot, hindi mo mababago yun. If we limit ourselves to change only, which is the only thing that we have proven to be real. It's the only phenomenon that we have proven to be real. And it is the only phenomenon where we have a convention that we agreed has this given nature. Even if we accept all of those conventions, the nature of change and the existence of change, it is still not logical to assume yung conclusion, yung premises, premises 7 and premises 9. I can accept premise 10 sa Aristotelian proof kasi by convention we agreed with causative. Pero premise 7, premise 9, kailangan mo siyang patunayan some other way. Kasi it does not follow from the definitions of premise 4 and premise 5 and premise 6. Unless you can substantiate 7 and 9, Aristotelian proof simply leads to a contingent or not necessary or imperfect truth. It's only a contingent conclusion. If you can't do that, then you cannot show that it is necessarily true, and by definition, you cannot win this debate. Okay? Moderator, go na. Okay na yun.
Okay. May ano pa, ilan pa ba? May 5 minutes pa. Pero yun, that was his rebuttal part. So this time we're going to have our cross-examination stage. So sa cross-examination, the speaker should mainly ask questions. Sana hindi naman mag-argue, but mainly ask questions. And the other can just answer the question. Sana as much as possible, very brief lang, like 30 seconds to 1 minute at most. Alright, so I know you guys respect each other naman, so here, let's go na. Let's start with Sir Arvin. Sir Arvin, you can ask questions now.
Okay, so first question, can we know that there is purely actual actualizer without knowing first substances?
Can we
know that there's purely actual actualizer without knowing first about substances that change?
Okay, answer na ako. If yan ang question mo, we should go back to the definition. To be knowledge, to be able to know, we need justification. It must be true, and we must be able to form belief. Assuming na hindi siya get your problem. Ang problema, can we experience actual actualizers? If we cannot, by definition, it is unknowable.
It's a yes or no question, Sir Arfel.
Yeah, I already told you.
Yes or no?
It's a yes or no question, true. Pero I already told you, if we cannot find a justification for actual actualizers, by definition, it cannot be known.
So,
conditional.
Well, you didn't consider the other part of the question, that whether can we know that purely actualizer exists without knowing first the different substances like water, wood.
Okay, let's say substances exist.
Yeah, we know this computer. We are substances.
Okay, substances exist. Ang problema, everything that we can observe, can experience, are by definition substances. So all substances that we experience are not purely actualizers. Tama?
Yes, that's right.
Therefore, by definition, we cannot experience pure actual actualizers. By
So,
that premise alone, I can tell you we cannot know actual actualizers that are pure.
so we cannot assume there's
We cannot know
purely
things,
actual actualizers alone. No?
actual actualizers, without experiencing it.
Okay, so hindi, ano na, malinaw na kasi kanina sa isang argument parang anyways, isa sa mga objection. Number 2, aware ka ba dun sa footnote sa libro? Dun sa
Page,
page 31 na
okay?
merong nakalagay doon about substance na
Okay.
yung sa Aristotelian ang substance ay binubuo ng substantial form and prime matter.
Yeah. But that's a footnote. It's not a premise of the Aristotelian.
Ay, well, pagka, ito namang footnote na to, andito sa informal part no.
Yeah, it's informal. Pero you have not put that in the proof you have given today. I cannot,
so, at least ando siya sa parang pag-substantiate ng mga premises. Kasi di ba ang argument sa premises,
pero
substantiate yung...
Okay. Pero sabihin na natin it's in the book.
Okay.
And it's not a formal, it's in an informal claim dun sa book.
Parang
Good.
pag-substantiate.
You did not present the book. You presented the proof.
Yes,
Remember,
pero
if present the book, you presented the proof.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot insert something from the book that you have not presented as proof.
Well, the proof is from the book too. So, anyways, that's just my question. Next question. Okay. Are composite things, those simple parts you said, are those simple parts composite or not composite?
I don't know.
The alleged simple parts.
I don't know.
Particles.
So, I'm gonna tell you, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Why? Because we have never experienced a totally simple thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can claim it exists, pero it is, again, not knowledge because it is not justifiable by our available justification.
Okay, so good. So those are composites too. They need more explanation. Number 4, in the rationalist proof ba, does it say that all explanations are alive?
I'm not a rationalist.
So, no. Or,
I'm a naturalist.
Yes,
I don't know. I'm not a rationalist.
Anyway, okay. So you don't have answer for number 4.
I'm a naturalist.
Okay, number 5. Do you know why change is necessarily actualization of potential?
I don't know. You gave that definition. I told you it's a contingent proposition. Therefore, it is not considered absolute knowledge. It's an imperfect knowledge.
So
for the sake of this argument, I accepted it to be true.
Not
convention. So, it's not necessary to be true.
Huwag kayo mag-English lagi ha. Pwede naman kayo mag-Tagalog. Pero para naman sa ating viewers ko, para mas maintindihan nila.
So, okay. I see. So, hindi ka agree na yung change ay necessarily actualization ng potential. Ibig sabihin, some change are not actualization of potential. Gano'n.
Okay, ganito. It's not a perfect, by definition, it is not a perfect description of change. Yun ang alam natin. Pero, for the sake of this argument, I agree with you.
Oh.
For the sake of this argument, I agree with you.
I want to settle the reason why you don't agree from the start. To prove that this is a wrong definition or description of change, the actualization of potential, it means you have some other more accurate description.
You have 30 seconds left.
So, can you show by Kaya mo bang
I can.
ipakita na
I already made it.
hindi talaga actualization ng potential ng change kasi merong mas tamang ibang description ng change, gano'n?
Moderator,
Yan.
can you put up slide number?
You can answer this question, by the way, tapos diretso ka na sa question mo. Kasi si turn mo na. Alright?
I already gave you two descriptions of change. A purely empirical description of change and a theoretical description of change. You gave the theoretical description. I gave the empirical description. Therefore, there are two definitions of change that exist. It is not necessarily your description. Did it answer your question?
Bawal na, no? Bawal na akong kay Arfel na no? Kung pwede papayagan pa ako, may follow-up question sa last na yan.
Okay lang.
We can talk about it mamaya
Yes,
sa ating open discussion. Alright? Para mas maganda yung flow. Okay, Sir Arfel, you can start asking questions na.
Una, ako naman. Arvin, tanong ko sa'yo, you gave the definitions of change. Tama? Tama. Okay.
Actualization ng potential.
For the sake of argument, let's agree that the actual actualizer exists.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Kung nag-iisa lang siya at that moment in time, may change bang possible?
Yes. Ay,
Why?
pag nag-iisa lang, wala pang creation.
Nag-iisa lang siya.
No.
Can
There's no
be
change.
possible?
There's no change in purely actualization.
If only a purely actualizer exists and it is one, you agreed,
Yes.
then change cannot exist. Cannot occur.
Yes. It should, the substance must be created first.
Oh yeah. Therefore, are you claiming at the very beginning of time or before time exists, may kasama yung actual actualizer?
I don't know. Kasi hindi kaya prove by reason na eternal ang world or hindi eternal ang world. Pero kaya i-prove ng reason na may cause ang world, eternal man ito o hindi.
Yeah, it can be proven that there's a cause, but we cannot prove if it's eternal or not.
Yung world Pero si God, yung purely actualizer kaya ko.
Tanong ko, yun lang tanong ko sa'yo eh. Kung purely actualizer lang ang nag-i-exist, can change occur?
No, because purely actualizer
No,
is
you said no. You said no.
Yes.
Therefore, God is not the only necessary substance for change to occur. May kasama siya.
No, we just need to create substances.
You assume
the ideas in his mind are the substance,
you're stating that an actual actualizer existing, kailangan niya lang mag-create ng something.
Yeah. Yes. For there to have
is that part of the proof?
No, because what we are proving here is not the relation of God to the world, but how the world or even single points to God.
Okay lang. I understand. Pero, is that part of the proof?
Is that part of the proof? No.
No. Therefore, you cannot use that position to substantiate the proof given.
Well, I think it's good because you already agree that the purely actualizer exists.
Yeah, we agreed for the sake of argument that purely actualizers can exist. But can we know?
Can we know that? The proof shows that purely actualizer exists.
How? You already said change.
We start with the reality of change. We already know there's change.
You already agreed that for change to occur, there could be, not necessary, a purely actualizer, but it is not enough. there must also be a substance that changes.
Yes, that's why my first question
it is the only
earlier,
phenomenon
whether can we
where we have
know
a
there is
contention.
purely actualizer
I will
without
tell
knowing
you,
first substance,
I
changing
don't know.
substance?
I don't know. What is important here is that you have gave a proof, and I have just demonstrated that the proof is not enough.
Well, the proof doesn't say that let's agree for the sake of argument that purely actualizer exists. The proof moves in a way in such a way that there are substances like wood, water, and it points to the existence of the purely actualizer. So I don't
No,
think you are
no, it
really
doesn't.
addressing the proof in that
No, it
question.
doesn't. The purely actualizer is not necessary for change to occur. Why?
Purely
A purely actualizer is not necessary for change to occur. We
mhm,
just need an actual actualizer and
mhm.
an actual substance S. That is the only thing that can be proven by accepting the fact of change. Therefore, the existence of a purely actual actualizer is an insertion, an unnecessary proposition to the given fact of change. Again, if this is given, your proof again is not enough to substantiate the existence of a purely actual actualizer.
Okay, so can I comment to that?
Of course.
So I think it's just a bare assertion to say that you just need an actual actualizer and a changing substance to have a change. But it doesn't address the part of the proof that says that the actual actualizer is either actualizes by another actual thing and so on and so forth, or that actual
Yeah, correct.
actualizer is pure actual actualizer. But we can
Yeah, I
see
agree.
in the proof that it boils down into the existence of the purely actual actualizer. So it still needs that the purely actual actualizer must be there in order to explain change.
That is
Even
not
the proof.
substantiated by the fact of change. Kasi actual actualizer is not necessary for change to occur. The only thing that we have agreed and have proven to be true is change to exist. Change exists without a purely actual actualizer.
Uh, why? Can
Change
you?
exists without a purely actual actualizer.
But meaning you are not agreeing with the fourth
Yes or
premise
no?
that
Can change occur without a purely actual actualizer?
no change can
Why?
because change is the actualization of potential and
Correct?
whatever potential that is actualized must be actualized by another actual thing.
Oops, that's an insertion. I cannot accept that fact.
Uh,
Because observation natin we can observe this, may nag-change. Merong, there's for example a glass, it turns cold.
mm,
Change happened.
mm.
Have you seen an actualizer causing that change?
At
No.
the temperature of the room.
Is
Suppose
it
suppose
purely actual
the
actualizer?
yes, it's an
Is it purely
actualizer
actual
and it's
actual?
also
Is the
actual.
heat purely actual actualizer?
Not
Or
yet, but the heat
Not
must
yet.
also be
Therefore, it is not necessary for that change to occur.
but I can still ask the question.
all right.
You
Why
can
is
still ask the
it's hot
question, of
instead of
course.
Sandali
cold?
lang. Okay, relax
Of
mo.
course, you can ask the question,
We
but it
can
is not necessary for that.
we're on the open discussion part na po. So, it depends sa tayo magsisimula. Okay, kung gusto niyo matuloy dun sa
Okay.
contention niyo, it's okay. Alright, so I'm just reminding viewers na you can send your
Mm.
questions to the page, or PM the page or
Okay.
comment section. PM niyo yung questions niyo. At saka as much as possible, lagyan niyo kung kanino niyo pinipresent yung question kay theist side or kay agnostic side. Alright, so you can continue with your thing, mga debaters. I'm sorry for interrupting. Open discussion stage na po tayo.
Okay lang. Again,
So
sasabihin ko sa inyo, we have observed change. We observe change everywhere. Pero ito ang point. Changes occur that does not necessitate a purely actual actualizer. Tama? Ang alam natin,
The question,
is that ang alam lang natin is that the actualizer is actual and the substance is the thing that changes is actual. Yun lang yung given. Change occurs. Therefore, to further assume that purely actual actualizers exist is not supported by the fact that change occurs. You know?
I think it begs the question against the Aristotelian proof. It ignores the premises that the actual actualizer is either actualized by another actualizer and so on, or the actual actualizer itself is purely actual actualizer. So I think you need to engage those premises. When you ignore that, I agree of what you're saying. There's just change, there's the actualizer, and that's that. But that's ignoring the proof.
Okay, let's assume, para masaya, kasi para hindi boring. Let's assume that that happened. Okay, let's assume that something, that creation happened.
Okay.
Is that knowledge? Is that true? Let's assume that creation occurred, na merong potential for existence, nag-actualize, at it causes existence. Is that true?